And welcome back to the Contrarians. Today we've got another panel looking at a Patreon voted topic, an album battle between Soundgarden's Badmotorfinger and Alice in Chains' Dirt. Now, before we get rolling, I did want to say, when we did this for Def Leppard versus Iron Maiden, there were a lot of comments about why are you choosing those two albums? And I thought, well, those albums are the two entry albums from the most popular bands to come out of the new wave of British heavy metal, and they came out a couple of months apart. They're pretty natural fits. And likewise with this pair of albums. But the truth of it is, somebody suggested it, people voted on it. These are the albums that were chosen. So if it seems like a weird matchup to you, just go with it. We're going to have fun talking about these bands. All right, so Badmotorfinger was Soundgarden's third album, released October 91. Took it about 5 months to go gold, and it was certified platinum in January of 1993. Dirt came out September of 92. It went gold in 3 months and was certified platinum only 1 week later. So it took off like a rocket and is currently certified 6 times platinum. So a very, very popular album from the early 90s. And we will see what our esteemed panel has to say about Badmotorfinger versus Dirt. I'm going to start with Kevin. Kevin, tell us what you think and pick a winner. You got to pick a winner.
Okay. So when we're talking grunge, I think these two bands and these two albums in particular are the top of the heap for me. I think Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, to me, were a cut above, say Nirvana and Pearl Jam, just for my personal taste, a little heavier. And I think these two albums are probably their best in my opinion. So to me, they're both 10 out of 10 albums. So I'm really going to have to split hairs here to pick a winner. I guess I'll start with Dirt. And there are some significant differences, I think, once you get into just the sonics of the album, the material, just the overall vibe of the album, too. Dirt is, what's amazing about Dirt is it's extremely dark material, but the songs are very catchy at the same time. I think that's a testament to the band's just writing great. They write great songs, and even though they're very inward and personal songs, I think there's a really, like I said, they're really catchy, even though that's some dark material, and they seem very personal songs. It's almost like as the album goes on, I feel like the second half of it is almost like a concept album. It's like this. All the songs are about drugs, slipping deeper into that abyss. And it ends with Wood, which was actually written before the album proper for the single soundtrack. And it's about Andee Wood, who, died from a drug overdose from Mother Love Bone. So I don't know if it's prophetic or if that's just what the band was feeling at the time, but the material is very dark. So if I'm going to start to split hairs between these two albums, I think Dirt, although the production is good, I don't like it as much as Badmotorfinger. I think the production is kind of like this coagulation of sound, the guitars and the drums in particular, like it's massive and it sounds great, but it's a little overwhelming at times. And I'm not a big fan of the snare sound from Sean's drums. It just sounds too echoey, I guess. I don't know the right term for it. It just doesn't have that snap that I like. And I guess overall for that album, because it is so dark and I've listened to it millions of times, I have to sort of be in the mood for it. It's it kind of takes you on a ride. But it's hard to argue with songs like Rooster and Wood. That's the other thing with this song. I have to listen to every song when I listen to this album. It's a front to back album. And I don't get sick of Wood. I don't get sick of Rooster. Rain When I Die is great. Them Bones is great. Even all the way down to Hate to Feel and Godsmack. Those are probably songs that are lower down on people's list. I think those are great songs. So if I move over to Badmotorfinger now, I think that where Dirt is very inward and personal feeling, Badmotorfinger has a more outward kind of vibe to it. You know, they're singing about let's say in Jesus Christ Pose, Holy Water, or songs about, you know, religion, organized religion. And Slaves and Bulldozers, I think, is about the music industry and kind of getting taken advantage of there. So they're singing about different topics. And I think it's a little more experimental because of some of the topics they have. The other thing I'll say about Chris, I feel like that album has more dynamics too compared to Dirt. Whereas Jerry and Lane's voices kind of create an instrument, it's not super dynamic. There is a few parts where Lane goes off, but Chris Cornell is truly an instrument. That's the part I really liked about that album. I think during the production of Dirt, it's more spacious. You can hear a lot more instrument separation, and that's good because these guys are playing really disparate parts at times, and I kind of like that. Like there's this kind of beautiful tension at times where the riff doesn't sound like it should go even in a song, but it's working with the drums and the bass and Chris's voice. And sometimes that space, they're creating a beautiful tension, and there's someone has to interject a fill, kind of bring it all together or something like that. It's really interesting, and that was the biggest thing I got when I listened to these two albums was that space and that tension. I guess if I had to pick a winner today, like I said, these are both 10 out of 10s for me. So maybe this one gets an 11. I'm going to pick Badmotorfinger. I just think it's more creative. I think the instrumentation's a little better. Chris's voice, I mean, you can't argue with Chris Cornell's voice. It's just second to none. And yeah, I'm picking Badmotorfinger.
Okay, getting us off to a Soundgarden start. All right, we're going to go to Janitor of Rock, the third member of our esteemed Of Rock family. Alex, tell us about these two albums and pick a winner.
Okay, thank you. So, Badmotorfinger and Dirt were actually my personal introduction to heavy rock, because before I listened to a little bit lighter stuff, of course, yeah, Nirvana, I don't know, punk rock, but not really something I would consider as heavy rock. So I love both albums, and it was really hard to pick a winner here. So yeah, and also the styles are very different because, as Kevin already said, I think that was pretty clear. Soundgarden has a more complex sound, I would say. Every band member takes over a lead role on some point in songs, and Alice in Chains is more conservative heavy rock, a conservative heavy rock band. I don't mean it in a bad way, but they rely on vocal melodies and guitar melodies basically, and the rhythm section is accompanying it. Very good. But yeah, and I had some problems to compare those two styles because and Soundgarden is much more experimental, and if a band is experimental, it also can sometimes be a little bit annoying if you're not in the mood. So I have a problem with many Soundgarden records because they tend to be songs tend to be a bit too long. Albums tend to be a bit too long, and experimental sections tend to be a bit too long sometimes. So yeah, so but I love both albums. Yeah, Soundgarden is much more punk influenced than Alice in Chains. I don't hear any punk influence in Alice in Chains, to be honest. I think I read something about that the bass player played once in a punk band, but other than that, I don't think Jerry Cantrell is into any punk band or something like that. And yeah, I tend to like punk influenced metal heavy rock bands more. But yeah, in this case, it's really difficult. What I also wanted to add about Badmotorfinger is Badmotorfinger to me is very front-loaded with the better songs, also which also tend to be the hits, like Jesus Christ Post, Rusty Cage, Outshined. I would include Somewhere. It's one of my favorite songs on the album. All of them are on the first side, album side, and the second album side is also very good, but not nearly as good as the first side. So, and the Alice in Chains album is much more consistent from front to back. You have one great song after another, in my opinion. Lane Staley to me is the singer I personally like more, because I just love his voice. He could do anything. I like it. With Chris Cornell, I mean, Chris is great. He can do a lot of things with his voice, and he's awesome at it. But some things he does, especially the high screams, are not really for me. So it's I don't like the album Louder Than Love very much, because he's doing this constantly, this high screams, super powerful, and to me it feels a bit over the top. I mean, it's really good. I mean, he's a great singer, but it's not really for me. I like the screams of some people. From other people's, I don't like it so much, and yeah, sometimes I have problems with Soundgarden. And on some spots on Badmotorfinger, I also have problems. So I would pick Dirt, because it's the more consistent album, and Lane can do no wrong, and the songwriting is amazing. And yeah, that's my pick.
Okay. So one for each. Well, there are five of us, so we're not going to have a tie no matter what happens. We'll see which way this goes. Andee, tell us what you think about these albums and which one's the winner for you.
All right. Well, I would say that these two albums are my favorite albums by these two bands. I think that in my mind, they sum up the Seattle sound better than anything else. There's some overlap if you listen to the beginning of Slaves and Bulldozers versus Rain When I Die. They both kind of start with this clanky, lumbering kind of junkyard, overcast guitar noise, kind of scrapey sounds. It just sounds, it has that dreariness. I think that's kind of, when Black Sabbath first came out in the early 70s, rock journalists used to call them downer rock. And this is the real downer rock. I mean, these bands took all the feel-good vibes of the 80s and just threw it in the garbage. They were like, we're going to write songs about dysfunction, despair, addiction, mortality, you name it. I mean, all the negativity, suspicion of, authority figures, and to me, these two albums, they have all of that stuff going on lyrically. Obviously, Dirt is more kind of angled more towards the addiction side of it, but they both actually sound like where they're from, which is always really interesting to me when a band can pull that off, when they can actually sound like the place they're from. It sounds rainy, it sounds overcast, it sounds dreary. So I love these two albums. They both have a lot of odd time signatures. They both have down-tuned guitars, although Badmotorfinger goes more extreme in that department. They both have anthems, although I think that Dirt has more anthems, and I think that Dirt, even the more angular, flatted interval type songs, always manage to come up with a catchy chorus. The production, the two producers involved here, it's interesting because I consider them to both be the just the architects of the greatest guitar sounds of metal and hard rock in the 90s. So you have Dave Jordan, you know, who gave us, you know, first he gives us Jane's Addiction. You know, he did some stuff with Social Distortion. Alice in Chains, to me, the guitar sounds are just like these kind of perfect slashing, serrated, metallic guitar sounds, really layered, really multi-tracked. And then Terry Date, who produced Badmotorfinger, is the guy that brings us the Pantera sound. And then later Prong and White Zombie. And that's like a really like kind of high gain, but clean, gated, super just futuristic kind of cold guitar sound. But he doesn't bring that at all to this album. Like the production style, I would never have guessed that this was Terry Date producing this album. So it, and granted, Soundgarden is not that kind of band. They're not like a Pantera. They are kind of a more 70s oriented, kind of sludgier, organic kind of sounds. Let's see. I'm just going to try to remember what I jotted down here about this. Great lyrics on Badmotorfinger. I think they're more poetic overall. You know, looking California, feeling Minnesota. That kind of sums up the whole grunge thing right there. You know, there's a lot of good-looking guys in this movement that had really dark demons. You know, the Badmotorfinger trick, I think, is the combination of angularity with melody, and you get that especially on Mind Riot and Somewhere. The odd time signatures just create this jagged feeling, but there's always a cool through line melodically that Chris Cornell manages to weave across everything. I mean, Black Hole Sun is probably, which is not on this album, is probably his ultimate contribution in terms of that thing of singing over really unresolved chords. You know, the Badmotorfinger ethos seems to be more antagonistic and noisy. There's a thing that they do in there's like that seasick drone that you hear in the verses of Room 1,000 Years Wide. You're like, that's just taunting you. Like, go ahead, try to get through this song. And I love that kind of stuff. You know, it's like, it sounds like, you know, My Bloody Valentine or something. And there you get like the skronking saxophone in Drawing Flies. And again, just the most like self-loathing but poetic lyrics there. You know, sitting here like wet ashes with X's in my eyes, drawing flies. Yeah, there's just so many lines like that. Yeah, New Damage ends the album with this lumbering kind of Sabbathy, maybe not, kind of Sabbathy. Both of these albums kind of end Sabbathy. The Wreck is Going Down, Get Out Before You Drown. These are really pessimistic lyrics. I think that the funny thing about Dirt is that it is famously about just being hopelessly hooked on heroin. But the band does not sound compromised. They don't sound hobbled. They don't sound, you know, they sound very confident and kind of world beating. And I think that what they had, the edge that they have over Soundgarden is basically they always wrap these vocal harmonies around everything, which gives it kind of a warmth, and the timbre of the voices, Lane Staley's voice and Jerry's voice, is warmer, and it's a little bit more inviting. You know, as you were saying about the screeching of the Chris Cornell thing, that's another provocation. Like, go ahead, keep trying to listen to me. And you know, but Lane Staley does his weird shit too. Like in Godsmack, he's doing that thing where he's, you know, singing the whole verse like that. You know, but I think that there's more pound for pound. There's more anthems on Dirt. You know, you've got Them Bones, Damn That River, Wood, Rooster, Down in a Hole is pretty anthemic. So I think that their pop sensibility kind of makes it a tighter package. I much prefer the production of Dirt actually to Badmotorfinger. I think Badmotorfinger was, for whatever reason, it was kind of a missed opportunity production wise. I think they got a much better mix on, you know, their next couple of albums, and I'm not sure why that is, because I think Terry Date is amazing. What else did I want to say about this? Angry Chair has all the flatted intervals, the flat second, the flat sixth, the flat five. You know, it has all that Sabbathy doominess, but there's the just in the end there's a melodicism to it that everybody can relate to, and I think that is why this album sold, I think, something like 5 times more than Badmotorfinger. So anyway, I put these 2 albums as just being absolutely neck and neck. I think they sound more like Seattle than anything else. But I think I'm going to give it to Dirt just because I think the production is better, and it's nicer to listen to for 15 minutes, or I don't know how long these albums are, but you know, one other thing, the lead guitar playing on both these albums is also kind of similar. Like, I agree that like the Soundgarden thing is coming more from like noise and punk, and Alice in Chains is coming from metal, but the 2 lead guitar styles are still really like splatty and kind of reckless sounding, and a lot of wah-wah pedal, and not especially proficient or anything. There isn't like, you don't hear even with Lane Staley, you don't hear a lot of hangover of the virtuoso 80s metal kind of thing, you know. So that lends itself well to this really like really dark lyrical stuff that's going on in Dirt. It's got like this it's got just enough ugliness in it to just like give credibility to the subject matter, even though the band sounds really confident and they're playing at the peak of their abilities. It's just it's got a lot of like on purpose ugliness, and both of these albums do, but I think that Dirt just has a little bit more of a warm casing around it. So I'm going to give it to Dirt.
Okay. So 2 for Alice in Chains so far. Let's go to Phil and see what he thinks. Phil, tell us about these albums and pick a winner.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm gonna echo a lot of what was said already before. Where should I start from? Well, I'm just gonna throw my thoughts around here. It's funny, you know, I got into Chris Cornell has been for I don't know how many, for a very long time, has been one of my top 5 singers, you know, alongside Freddie Mercury, Dio, whatever. And I actually I got acquainted with Chris Cornell not through Soundgarden initially, but through his solo career, and especially the album Euphoria Morning. And what I loved about Chris Cornell in his solo career, and then also a little bit with Audioslave, and then later on with Soundgarden, is that, I mean, the guy, obviously, you know, insane range, amazing performative style. You know, he had a way of interpreting lyrics, not just singing them well or properly. He had a way of putting his soul, putting character, putting meaning in the way he sang certain lyrics. But for me, one of the greatest things about Chris Cornell was when he would be in his sort of mid-range, you could hear some of those influences from soul, or maybe even from Motown. He had a very soulful kind of voice. So I actually, when I heard Badmotorfinger, I was just like blown away by how he was going to that head voice. and those screams, right? Which were not just, that they are high, as though I had never heard before Ian Gillan and Child in Time, but when you hear him screaming, he also adds that kind of soulfulness to the screams. But over time, and this is where I would echo what the janitor said before, which is that after a while, I start to realize that I prefer Chris Cornell when he's more in his mid-range, even in like lower and lower. And that's why I think actually, over the years, I'm leaning more towards Super Unknown and that kind of style of Black Hole Sun, where he's more in his mid-range and he's a bit smarter in how he uses head voice and screaming, right? He knows where to use it to accentuate something, to give a crescendo, and rather than to just like, create a wall of sound that's based on those screams, which was, I guess, very fitting for Badmotorfinger and for that time where they are kind of like very punkish and very kind of like coming out of a cage in a way. You get that feeling with Badmotorfinger and with also Louder Than Love, that this is like wild animals coming out of a cage, and they're just voracious, while indeed Alice in Chains, there is something a little bit more conservative, as was mentioned before, not in a bad way, obviously. Conservative can also mean more solid songwriting, inserting experimentation here or there where it kind of serves to like a seasoning, but not like experimentation for the sake of it. So that's one thing about Chris Cornell I wanted to say. And yeah, over the years I get less and less blown away from songs like Slaves and Bulldozers when he goes into those really high screams. And I like him more when he's more like indeed in the mid-range. And I love Soundgarden more and more when I realize that they have those kind of Led Zeppelin influences, the sort of Physical Graffiti and later on style of Jimmy Page. I really like it when the guitar player Kim Thayil, when he gets into that kind of Zeppelin vibe mixed with all of his own kind of universe of punk, Sabbath, experimentation, strange, unusual chords, unusual tuning, and of course all those odd time signatures. I mean, it's crazy. Like all these bands were so proficient with rhythm and odd time signatures, but they didn't do it in the same way that a Frank Zappa would do it or Rush would do it. Here it's like it adds to that sense of an angular style, something that's really strange and off kind of, and even off-putting or sickening in a way, it's all part of that kind of perspective that they had on music, which is, how should I summarize it? I was watching a video today by one of my favorite guitar YouTubers, Ben Eller, who was talking about Them Bones from the opening track from Dirt, and why every guitar player should try to learn Them Bones. And basically he said like, this is like the best, this album, Dirt, is the best feel bad album. I mean, to be honest, this is like, yeah, that is what it is, feel bad. It's not even as feel bad as, I don't know, Joy Division or anything like that. I think this is like super depressing, and it's full of those kind of like, yeah, angular style of songwriting that adds to the feel bad vibe. And I was also watching a interview by Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age, who said that for him, Dirt is basically depressing Black Sabbath. And that just like really just clicked in my mind. Like that's exactly, well, not exactly, but to a very large extent what it is, depressing Black Sabbath. But then you see like what Jerry Cantrell does, and that's where, as a guitar player as well, personally, I'm enamored by the sound of Jerry Cantrell, his bluesy style, which is like, enriched by all that, not punkish, but that universe of grunge, right? All the noisy dissonant stuff, the odd time signatures, the tone, that insane tone, the fact that he's playing on this drop D flat, which makes it even more dark and ominous sounding. And yeah, for me, Dirt has like really goes up much higher in my my preferences because of Jerry Cantrell, because of his style, his tone, his playing, the fact that he owes so much to the blues. And I'm a complete sucker for this kind of dark, sludgy blues. I love bands like Queens of the Stone Age, but also bands like Down, for instance. And I love Pepper Keenan from Down and Corrosion of Conformity. And I think that these guys owe a lot to Jerry Cantrell and that kind of dark, slow, sludgy blues that you get with Rooster, Down in a Hole. You know, it's very melancholic, but it's not cheesy, sad. It's brooding and with emotion that's really raw and real. And it has a lot of that bluesiness that I really love to hear. I really appreciate all the experimentation and the dissonance that you get with Badmotorfinger, and even in, you know, some Nirvana. But I really like it when a band like Alice in Chains get more into that kind of grimy blues thing, mixed with a bit of Sabbath and maybe even a bit of Zeppelin as well. The other thing, of course, is those dual harmonies. I'm a complete sucker for these dual vocal harmonies where like the voice of Cantrell kind of matches that of Lane Staley, and together it creates another level of this kind of emotion, feeling, atmosphere that's really hard to pin down when it comes to an album like Dirt. To call it feel bad, it's still really complex. It's very rich and musically as well. And what else I want to say? Yeah, Rooster is one of my favorite songs ever. Again, because of that slow, sludgy bluesiness. I want to echo also what the janitor said before about Badmotorfinger, which is that, I mean, you have an album here that starts with Rusty Cage, where you hear like, this is like proto-stoner, basically. I mean, first you get, I guess, you know, there's Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, and then when you get to a song like Rusty Cage, I hear there all of that kind of the groove, the bluesiness, the energy and attitude of bands like Caius, Queens of the Stone Age, and Down, and all of that kind of school of stoner. Either it's more like the Southern stuff or bands like indeed Queens of the Stone Age. But then after you get to Searching with My Good Eye Closed, maybe a room a thousand years wide, again, I really appreciate the experimentation, the insane time signatures, that kind of desire to push the boundaries a bit, to try new things, but it does start to drag a little bit. I think that the album does do a little bit of a dip on the second half, and those songs are a little bit too long, and they even if they're not really long, they feel like they drag a little bit. While Dirt, with 13 songs compared to 12 on Badmotorfinger, from beginning to end, they're all bangers for me, and they're very consistent in maintaining that kind of atmosphere and feeling. Either it is, again, sludgy blues or the really dark angular stuff of Angry Chair with that vocal delivery. And yeah, towards the end with Badmotorfinger, I get a little bit tired. And listening to it just a couple of days ago, I said to myself, maybe actually now I'm more of a fan of Super Unknown and even Down on the Upside rather than Badmotorfinger. I like it when these bands they become better songwriters. They introduce more of a pop sensibility with hooks as well. Dirt has some amazing hooks. I mean, you hear Them Bones and the way it starts, it's like bam, all-time signature. I don't know if it starts on the 1 or the 2 or the 4 or whatever. Maybe Andee, you can explain that a bit better. But then the chorus of Them Bones has something catchy, you know, and I really appreciate that because it's really good songwriting, you know, and ultimately you have to be a little bit conservative to have some good, solid songwriting in the framework of grunge, you know. I mean, even Nirvana, who are considered the grunge band, maybe the only band that was really grunge, even they have obviously many hooks, right? And again, to say about Chris Cornell that how much I like it when he becomes more soulful. I mean, listen to Temple of the Dog, especially when he does the duo with Eddie Vedder. So much soul, you know, especially in the mid range. I wish we could have heard one day a kind of like, I don't know, Motown album by Chris Cornell, something in that vein, you know, because there wasn't a style of music he couldn't do. And then you see that later on with his solo career as well. I was lucky enough to see him live 1 year before his death. And that kind of confirmed what I always thought, that he is just amazing in the mid-range, you know. So yeah, I don't think I have much more to say on that. For me, obviously, it's Dirt. I love Jerry Cantrell's style and sound. Kim Thayil is maybe more of a kind of trailblazer, and I like it when they become a little bit more conservative and introduce something that we're all familiar with, the bluesiness, a nice riff, you know, a certain tone that's warm and all-encompassing, you know, that Jerry Cantrell sound that still today he maintains. His last solo album is a masterpiece just for the sound and the guitar tone. Not too much soloing, very bluesy again. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Obviously, I'm voting for Dirt. Yeah.
Okay. So so far 3 for Alice in Chains, 1 for Soundgarden. And well, spoiler alert, I'm going for Alice in Chains. So I actually had an interestingly similar experience when I first heard Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. Now, this is back when the albums came out. I was 23 years old when Badmotorfinger came out. And I've said in the 80s, I was in Montana. In the 90s, I'd moved down to Oklahoma City. It was the first time in my life where I was in a market with a big rock radio station. So it was really the first time I was listening to rock radio. And I was in my car driving down the road and they played Outshined. And I just drove right to the CD store and went, hey, I heard this song on the radio. And they went, that's Soundgarden, Badmotorfinger. Got the album, took it home, listened to it, and it didn't grab me. And it's hard to explain why. On paper, I should adore Badmotorfinger. You know, Black Sabbath are unquestionably one of my favorite bands. Sometimes I'll call them my favorite band, but they're unquestionably in my upper echelon of bands. And if you were a heavy metal fan in the 80s, as I was, then your choice of heavy metal was thrash and what we at the time called glam. And there were a few bands around the periphery that you just called heavy metal without a qualifier, guys like Dio or Ozzy. And if you think about 1991, when Badmotorfinger came out, this is the same year Metallica released the Black Album. It's the same year that Ozzy released No More Tears. And if you look at reviews from the time, which I love Martin's, also on this channel, he does the Reliving Old Reviews as a Useless Tool of Confusion. And one of the interesting things about that is seeing how people interacted with the album at the time it was released. Well, in 1991, no one said Soundgarden was grunge. No one said it was the Seattle sound. It was a heavy metal album. It was treated as a heavy metal album. It was reviewed as a heavy metal album. And it was so much slower and doomier. Sludge is a good word. It was so Black Sabbath influenced, but over a punk rhythm section. The bass player and drummer are so punky on this album. They're so frantic. Whereas Kim is really laying back, but I think of it as a minimalist album, because even though he's laying down a lot of riffs, he's not filling up tracks and tracks and tracks of overdubbed guitars. And he does some very interesting things like the opener, Rusty Cage. All of the movement from the front of that song, your verse, bridge, chorus, is all in the vocals, while the music stays exactly the same. He's just going constantly, and Chris Cornell is supplying all the movement. And that's really weird. That's a very strange compositional technique, and it didn't sound like anything else. And you get to a song like Slaves and Bulldozers, Andee already mentioned it. It's got that almost like nails on a chalkboard kind of screechy sound layered on top of the main rhythm. And I had never thought of this as a confrontational album, but now having just relived it, I'm like, you know what? Now I get it. I think that was a great way to put it, because I listened to the album and I was not on board. I was like, yeah, you know what? I want something else. It's not quite melodic enough. You get to certain songs, like Room 1,000 Years Wide, that's got a great melodic sense to it. It's much more of just a regular song, and it has a lot less of that confrontation to it. First time I heard Alice in Chains, I was driving down the road and Man in the Box came on. And I just turned around, drove immediately over to the CD store and said, hey, I just heard this song on the radio, Man in the Box. And they said, well, that's Alice in Chains, Facelift. And I brought the album home and I listened to the whole thing and I didn't like it. And then I went to work and I came back and my roommate was listening to it. And he was like, this is the greatest album I've ever heard. Really? So I put it back on and listened to it again. And it took me a while to grow into it. But by the time Dirt came out, I was a dyed-in-the-wool Alice in Chains fanatic. I got to see them on this tour, open for Ozzy Osbourne. It was actually before Dirt came out, and the audience in Oklahoma City was not friendly to Alice in Chains. They were booing and throwing stuff. It was really a very hostile environment. And the guys put on a great show anyway. I think they were used to that because, again, Facelift had been billed as a heavy metal album and had to be evaluated as a heavy metal album. By the time Dirt came out, now everybody's talking about grunge. They're talking about the Seattle sound. And Dirt, which is much more heavy metal than Facelift ever was, is now evaluated as this new type of music that you don't even know what it is. And again, it's very Sabbath influenced, which I love. Jerry Cantrell is an amazing riff writer, but he also brings in this Hendrix influence. And one of the things that nobody's commented on so far, to me, Alice in Chains, I borrow a word from Andee here, the production on Dirt is a maximalist production. It's just got everything on it. It's got layers and layers of guitars. If you listen to Rain When I Die, he's got 2 solos going on at the beginning of that song. One of them's this kind of, acid rock, sort of Jimi Hendrix, feedback drenched wah-wah thing. And the other one's a much more blues influenced solo. And I hadn't heard anything like that in a really long time. Actually, not since probably Black Sabbath on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Tony Iommi used to do that. Who else does 2 overlapping guitar solos? Because it sounds terrible unless you have the right player. And I don't think you can overlook just how awesome those harmony vocals are. I'm sure other bands were doing harmony at the time, but King's X is the only one that comes to mind. And Alice in Chains are way heavier than King's X, although I love King's X, especially for the vocal harmonies. Now, that would have been a good tour if King's X had toured with Alice in Chains. I don't think they ever did. That would have been a good bill. But in any case, so you have these great songs. They're very, very heavy. I mean, Them Bones was their first single. That was so heavy. And it doesn't build up. It just starts immediately, bam, with vocal and guitar, like from Jump Street. It just grabs you. And then it's so freaking dark. And I often compare it to The Cure's Pornography. This is probably the darkest album since Pornography. But it doesn't have the same kind of emotional oppression to it that Pornography had. I guess probably because I was never a drug addict. So I'm participating, but at a couple of steps removed, right? It's like, I looked up this quote from B.B. King about the blues. Stick with me here. He says, blues is a tonic for whatever ails you. I could play the blues and then not be blue anymore. And to me, that's what Alice in Chains' Dirt was. It was cathartic. I was 24 years old at this point. I was college educated, but working a terrible job. Gen X was going through this weird thing where the world was actually fairly peaceful in the early 90s, but there was this kind of societal malaise. And this music really perfectly encapsulated that. But as dark as it was, you could listen to Dirt and I would feel better afterwards. Whereas when I listened to Soundgarden, I always felt a little bit dragged down. I felt like the songs were a little bit too long. I liked parts of Badmotorfinger, but I liked all of Dirt. And I listened to it a lot, just like over and over and over again. And I can sing most of the guitars. I can, sing most of the lyrics, even though some of those songs I hadn't listened to in a while. And one reason is because I always say, if you're willing to talk about music at this length that we do, if you're willing to sit down and listen to other people talk about music for this long, it's because you connect with music emotion. And sometimes I don't want that emotion, but sometimes I do. And when I do, Dirt is awesome. So that's me. Looks like it's 4-1 for Alice in Chains today. Although, Kevin, you made some really good points about Badmotorfinger. Let's go around one more time and see if anybody has any follow-up comments. So we'll start with Kevin. Kevin, follow-up comments?
Not much. I do love Alice in Chains. They're probably my second favorite band of all time. And I think don't sleep on those reunion albums with William Duvall and vocals. I think
they're excellent.
They're what's the first two? Black Gives Way to Blue and The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here. I think those are masterpieces as well.
And Rain Your Dog, great.
Yeah, it just goes to it's a testament to what a great songwriter Jerry Cantrell is. And I agree with Philip. Jerry Cantrell's last solo album is also a masterpiece. Just great stuff. So.
Okay, Alex, wrap up comments.
Yes, I also can echo what Philip said earlier about Chris Cornell's voice. To me, his baritone range is his most beautiful voice as well. I love it. Yeah.
Okay, Andee, any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, just to go back to the time signature thing. Them Bones is in 7/8, and Rusty Cage, I had to look it up. It's apparently in 19/8. Which counts eighth notes, and it's also at like 204 BPM when it starts off. So it doesn't start out very stoner.
No,
it's pretty fucking frenetic.
The riff is very stonerish, and then when it gets into the more groovy parts, that's where you start to hear a bit of that like Caius thing that would come later on.
It's the funny thing about it is they switch into this slow mode, and then they just stay there for the rest of the song. Which is cool. I mean, I love those kind of choices where the thing that I love, I love the bravery of Soundgarden as much as I love the more the tighter delivery of Alice in Chains, the more commercial delivery. The bravery of just doing the Soundgarden thing is just like, we're just doing whatever the fuck we want. Like, it sounded like there were no concessions given to any commercial. As you were saying, Reed, Badmotorfinger is not coming out as part of a movement that's going to take over the airwaves. It's actually kind of a miracle that Soundgarden got on the radio. Like when I think of the things even later down the road that were more commercial than this, My Wave and what was the other one that was just
blow up the outside world?
Blow Up the Outside World, Fell on Black Days. These are really angular, odd time, dissonant, dark lyric songs that were getting heavy play on commercial radio. So that was my thing about the time signatures. I also wanted to just follow up on when I said that Alice in Chains do not sound like a band that's compromised or hobbled by heroin addiction on this album. To me, the next album is the one that sounds like that. The next album is the one where it sounds like, oh, these guys are in trouble. I don't like that album. I find it uncomfortable to listen to.
Was that the Three-legged dog.
The three-legged dog, yeah. This album, it has so much like, it's like I said before, it has so much energy and confidence in it, and you just kind of feel like they're going to get through it. And then that next album, which comes out so much later, and it's just gotten so much worse, and it sounds defeated. So you know, I will also say that, Reed, when you said that Dirt is more heavy metal than Facelift, I think Facelift still has vestiges of the 80s in it. It still has some Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. I think they completely get rid of that with Dirt, and the guitar sound gets a little bit sludgier. It has less of that kind of the tight 80s palm muting, high gain kind of thing, and more of like a not fuzzy, but like almost kind of girthier, woolier guitar sound. And it just completely gets rid of any kind of whiff of the 80s. And it if anything, it just kind of harkens back to the 70s. But yeah, it's funny. These two albums, I appreciate them, but I appreciate one for its, I dare say, its commercial sensibilities, and the other one for its total lack of commercial sensibilities. But it still manages to win you over with melodies. And I forgot to mention also, Jesus Christ Pose is like my favorite Soundgarden song. It's so amazing. It just sums up this like chaotic, clattering, dystopian worldview to me, and the music video is insane. When I saw Soundgarden, they opened with that song, and I'll never forget it. Chris Cornell just stood up on top of his vocal monitor and opened his mouth, and that fucking first high note comes out. It's like that song just starts in the stratosphere.
Yeah, wow.
He crushed it. When I saw Alice in Chains, it was a much more subdued kind of thing. I think it had gotten to the point where Lane Staley was he looked pretty subdued by his drug issues.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it. That's all I have.
Okay. Well, guys, that was a great I think I've already said everything I have to say about these albums. I will say Outshined is my favorite Soundgarden song, but it is unapologetically because that riff is so Black Sabbath. Just that that is, if there was ever a song that was designed to appeal to me, that is the one.
Yeah, I mean, it's written on the pentatonic scale, right?
Yeah, I mean, I said it's a little primitive, it's a little minimalist, but sometimes the most powerful songs are. You don't have to have lots and lots of layers.
Yeah.
As much as I love the lots and lots of layers.
It's funny, for me, that song is more commercial than Fell on Black Days, which is it has the most like experimental aspects of Zeppelin. It's very Jimmy Page-ish, in the way it's kind of like written, and the choices that are made in terms of chords and intervals and stuff. It's interesting. But yeah.
I do remember an interview with the band on MTV when that song was released, and they asked him about the line "Look in California and Feel in Minnesota," and they said they had been in Minnesota in the winter, and it was the worst place they could possibly imagine. So that was just their description of a hellish place. So California he was looking good, but he was really in hell. So I thought that was pretty funny. All right, everyone. So leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about these albums. Looks like it's not an entirely clean sweep. I guess that would be inappropriate for an album named Dirt and a movement called grunge. But love these bands. I loved the music in the 90s. It's so hard to describe what it was like to be able to hear music this heavy on mainstream rock radio. That was just a sea change. You go from listening to Firehouse, Baby Don't Treat Me Bad, and then you're listening to, you know, Damn That River from Alice in Chains. It was a brave new world back then. And I think these types of bands could only have become popular in that environment. Maybe that's a discussion for a different day. Anyway, share the video, all that good kind of stuff. Check out the Patreon if you want to participate in the panels or possibly even suggest topics. Everybody gets a vote. All of these panels are voted on by the patrons. And thank you for spending a little time with us. We'll catch you again real soon on another video, gentlemen. That was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.